Hello, everyone, and welcome to our live webinar event where we will discuss how to create a frictionless customer journey without compromising the human element. But before we get started, some housekeeping rules. First of all, we're going to have two giveaways. We'll be giving away an Apple Watch along with AirPods to two random winners. Also, there is a Q&A section. It's on the left-hand side of your screen, and you're more than welcome to type your questions there for your panelists. And at the end of the presentation, we will go ahead and take your questions live. Now, four things that we're going to be covering today. We're going to be looking at why putting humanity at the center of customer and employee experiences can be vital for your organization, how to secure executive buy-in and a seat at the table for all your customer experience leaders out there, how to get better feedback from customers, and how to best observe consumer behavior, and then finally, the correlation between the employees and customer experience and how to continuously measure and refine them. We have an impressive panel today. So without any further ado, I'm going to go ahead and hand this call over to Kieran, who's going to kick this off for us.
Super. Well, thank you so much, Santi. And it is a joy to be here with all of you. I have the great privilege of moderating and facilitating our discussion. I am so pleased and privileged to be here with Jeanne and Mike. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Kieran King. I proudly serve as the Chief Customer Officer at TalkDesk. TalkDesk is crazy about customer service. We're a highly customer-obsessed organization, and we truly put the customer at the center of everything that we do. I am joined today by Jeanne Bliss and Michael Travers, and let me give you a little bit of background on them. So they're not going to brag on themselves the way I am going to brag on them. So I just want you to know how privileged and honored we all are to be hearing from them today. Just a little word about Jeanne. Jeanne has one mission, and that is to help companies all throughout the world be the best versions of themselves. She works and partners with companies to design and align all different kinds of behaviors around the customer to create really memorable relationships. She has a huge passion that's been developed over 35 years. She was the inaugural Chief Customer Officer at Land's End. She was also a CX leader at Coldwell Banker, Allstate, Microsoft, so she has lots of different experience across industries. She's written several books, and she is often referred to as the godmother of customer experience. So that's my description of you, Jeanne, but feel free to say hello to all of our attendees.
Hey, everybody. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon, wherever you are. Good to talk to you. You know, as Kieran mentioned, my work is about helping companies become the best version of themselves to both their customers and employees. And it's all I've ever known, starting with watching my dad in his Buster Brown shoe store sell shoes all around the world. And so it's in my bones because I'm an Italian, and in my bones because of how I was raised. So great to be here with all of you.
We're so happy to have you, Jeanne. So thank you for that. And let me tell the team about Michael. So Mike, you head up the customer experience at Fusion Connect today, but you also have a long and very prestigious career from top companies such as Windstream, where you've led various customer initiatives all across different multifaceted programs around fostering greater retention, customer sat, and analytics to help companies and your customers to make better decisions. So we're super happy to have you today, Mike. Feel free to say hello to the attendees.
Great to be part of the panel today, and looking forward to covering all the topics. Yeah, definitely along the lines of what Jeanne had said, you know, about 20 years of experience managing voice of the customer programs, starting out as a customer service representative, frontline, you know, in the nitty-gritty of making sure our customers were best served, all the way through to helping Fusion Connect and other companies prior to Fusion make sure that we are meeting their needs and requirements. So it's a pleasure being with everyone here.
I love it. Thank you so much for that, Mike. So let's go ahead to the first slide so we can introduce the first topic we'll tackle today, and that's putting the human at the center. So this first conversation is going to be ignited by you, Jeanne. So when you think about all the people that are joining us today, What is your best advice for how they can put the human at the center of all that they do?
Well, it's interesting because what's happened over time, and I've been at the very early part of this customer experience, movement, is that we're inadvertently putting the mechanics over the meaning of the work, meaning that we're focusing on the toolkit, and that's fine, but the overall arching meaning of the work is helping our companies become the best version of themselves, but most importantly, improve lives. And you can't say to your organization or write a memo or a mission statement that's like be a better human, because that doesn't translate. What we know as customers is that it's not only what you do, but how you do the work of your business. What we've defined a lot of CX by is the work of removing problems. Now, removing problems that you find through surveys or other things is fine, but it doesn't get to the root of the matter, which is what are customers' goals? What's important to them? What's happening in their life? And so what we've been really focusing on is how do you conduct yourself in business? We used to say at Land's End a million years ago, if we were people, how would we define as people? What are the attributes that would show up based on not only what we do, but how we do it? And one of the things, Kieran, that I think is important is that to earn this kind of growth, that people love you as a company and love your people, it's to act in an admirable way, have admirable actions that define how you do the work of your business. And so for me, the focus is on leading for growth, earned by how you improve lives. Now, that should and can include the CX toolkit, but leading for improving lives and helping customers and employees achieve their goals is about leadership. It's about choosing how you will and what you won't do to grow. And it's about making sure that you act differently so that you show up as a different kind of company in the marketplace. When you do that, Kieran, you'll grow in a different way. And it's not about kumbaya, fuzzy wuzzy kinds of things. There are specific approaches to achieving this admiration driven growth or customer humanity. But it's not, it supersedes the traditional CX toolkit. Because you have to engage the leaders, you have to unite them, you have to build one version of the truth, and we'll talk about that in a second. What do you think about that, Kieran?
I love it. So, Jeanne, you always inspire me. So, I think some of the key takeaways of what you just said is, at the heart of it, in order to keep the humanity at the center, we have to be dedicated to improving lives. I think the other thing I take away from that, and certainly something we try to do at TalkDesk, is to remove the mechanics that might be implements or encumbering the motion or the inertia that we apply to supporting customers. So I love that advice. And then I think it's such a really smart thing to be thinking, and almost a litmus test, if you will, of size your policies based on whether or not they're admirable.
Yeah. Policies, how you conduct yourself, how you enable your employees to do the work of the business. When you flip the brain, right, and the mode of why you're in business to be around improving customers' lives, but knowing their goals, it shifts everything. It glues the silos together. But Kieran, this is deliberate work that most companies don't do. When I coach leaders around the world, over about 90% of them don't do the heavy lifting to set the stage and unite the leadership team for doing this work to grow in an admirable way. We use the tools in our toolkit and say, this is broken, that's broken. We whack-a-mole things away, but that doesn't necessarily elevate us as a different kind of company. And it's also not necessarily sustainable. If the person who's driving the program leaves the building, people will go back to their corners of their silos and do what's easier, right? Which is to focus on their individual KPIs. And I'm not throwing stones at this. This is typically the way that organizations are structured, that, our frailties, how we've been rewarded, how we know how to achieve success. So that green dot, that's so important has everything to do with control. But this way of thinking has to do with uniting, gluing the organization together, starting with the leadership team so that they have one version of the truth, they're united, and then they can enable the rest of the organization to think in this different way.
It makes total sense. And Mike, I know you have decades worth of leadership experience. How does that resonate with you and the things that you see at Fusion Connect?
Uh, uh, I did all of that. That's well said. It's all about customer requirements. It's making sure that we manage to what the customers truly expect of us, and make sure that our employees as well have a seat at the table and are equipped to meet those customer requirements. With, of course, executive backing, and for us making sure we measure ourselves through our own internal KPIs, as well as how effective we are based on direct and indirect feedback coming from our customers day in and day out.
Excellent. I couldn't agree with both of you more. And Mike hit on a key phrase, which is the seat at the table. So very by coincidence, what I wanted to hear your thoughts on, both of you, but Jeanne, let's start with you. How does one secure that proverbial seat at the table?
Sure. Well, I've been doing this for 35 years as a practitioner and then coaching leaders. And what we know is that you have to start with a united understanding of where you are today and what customers' goals are. So I've been switching the language, very deliberate over the last 2 years, because even some of the toolkits that we're using are internally focused. So when you say, I ask people what their journey map is, for example, and it's a very internally thing. It's about what you want to get from a customer versus what you want to earn. You want to earn in terms of helping them achieve their goals. So you look at people's goal map, it's prospect, conquest, convert, sell, upsell. That is nothing to do with the customer. And we in a really well-intended way build these journey maps, but then the KPIs are about getting the customer to take these actions. So I call this a Vulcan mind melt, and it has to be very deliberate. One of the first things that we do is we have to come to one version of the truth of where you are today, but you also have to do a couple big heavy lifting kinds of things. Really understand goals. What are you there to help your customer achieve? They're not requirements. Mike, this is not I'm not attacking your word, but they're not requirements to download a document. They're goals that they want to achieve as a leader or as a practitioner, or outcomes in the business. And because we need to start with the bigger goals, because then that helps us operationalize. So a lot of companies haven't articulated those goals because they get into the weeds very quickly. So we build a goal map, but that takes multiple stages. We have to brainstorm the goals. Then we bring groups of customers in to talk about each goal. We always have executives sitting at the table to hear the voice of the customer. We have customers rate the reliability of the company coming together to deliver the goal, because a lot of times we know when we're presenting results, the service people or the salespeople will say, we take the hill and we always get it done. But they take the hill by overcoming the inability of the organization to work together. And so a big part of the work initially to achieve buy-in is identifying the goals, having customers come in, and everybody understanding how well we are working together as an organization at this starting point to achieve the goals. And it can't be an it depends experience. It depends on the person, the channel, the product. How well are we? And once you get to that, then we can start the work, because we're building a common language, and we can start really working on the bones underneath it. But we need to really change how people think about why they're in business.
I love what you said about oftentimes well-intended personnel, really, really passionate about customer experience, focus on what they can get.
Yeah.
Instead of what we can give to the customer. When altruistically, that's why we entered the mission and the whole profession.
Well, we're measured on the get, right? We're measured on prospects. We're measured on acquisition. We're measured on conversion. We're measured on downloads. And those may or may not correlate with customer goals.
Yeah. So the goal mapping idea and the kind of working session is really, really smart. A question though, is it best to have someone who doesn't have a stake in the whole topic facilitate that? How well does humanity itself show up in a goal mapping exercise?
It's a great question. And so I often will be that third, disinterested, not disinterested party, but a lot of chief customer officers do it as well, Kieran. The key is, though, with coach people, you have to check your ego and your silo pride at the door, because we're not measuring how well you're doing sales department or service department or claim department. We're evaluating how well we're working together on the customer's behalf, because it's that lack of coordination that creates, I'm Italian, the agita, the sick in the belly experience that customers have. And so we have to get to the root of the matter first, which is, what are the highest level goals? We want customers to say they've achieved because they gave us money. And then how well are we in a united way always delivering that? You got to get to accepting where we are today before you can move forward.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. And I have a couple of follow-up questions for you, Jeanne, but Mike, I'm wondering, have you seen this tool or this exercise of goal mapping work well in your experience?
It has. In the past, we definitely, it was all about CPQs, those critical to quality measures centered around the customer. And typically, I love Jeanne's answer, to be honest with you. Typically, when you're talking about executives and getting that seat at the table, people talk about monetizing CX and they're talking about ROI. That will naturally come about when you put the customer front and center, and literally everything else follows. You'll get more customers, you'll keep what you have, you'll grow your base just because you're centered and focused on them. But yes, it all centers around those critical measures and how well we meet those customers' needs and requirements.
Yeah, makes perfect sense to me. So if one of our listeners would like to start a goal mapping exercise, Jeanne, what are some of the tips and tricks that you can share with our group regarding how often you come back to evaluate progress? And do you bring customers back into that environment to let them know what you've done?
Sure. First of all, anybody can email me anytime. I'm happy to talk. I will gab with you if you want specific help. But on my nickel, I'm not selling you anything. But I think the big thing is we need to coach the leaders when they are, because we will rotate in multiple leaders to hear customers talking. We're doing this by Zoom right now for the last couple of years. But what's powerful about that is we're also able to video it and then share it with the rest of the organization. When you bring your leaders in, you have to coach them on two things. They can't defend, deny, or explain away what the customer's saying. They just have to ask clarifying questions. And again, they can't get into the weeds around the operation. You have to listen intently for what the customer is saying they need to accomplish. So what we'll do, and you may also need to do different goal sessions with your different stakeholders. So for example, when we were working with a very large pharmaceutical company, we did a separate goal map with the physicians, who were the financial stakeholders, separately from the office managers and the nurse practitioners, who were in the nuts and bolts of the work. And so first thing you want to do is decide on, how are you going to brainstorm the first version of the goal map? The cool thing about that is spread your net wide. Don't ever do this alone without key partners in the organization. As a chief customer officer, I always have the VP or senior VP of HR in the room, and I also always have the CFO in the room and the senior VP of IT or whoever runs that, because you need a group of leaders owning this. There's so much debate about the ownership of the work. Our job is to be glue, right?
Right.
Kieran?
Right.
Uniting the organization. That's right. So pick your partners, figure out your stakeholders, bring a lot of people together, give them a seat at the table, drafting the first version of the goal map, put them through the paces of evaluating the goals, thinking about them, then bring customers in. But the big thing is, after you do a goal map, don't revert back to the old way of thinking, which is just running surveys on each goals and then whack-a-moling problems, because this has got to be about a new way of thinking about the work of the business. You know, customers can't tell you from just a survey how to improve their life. You need to take the information and then be inspired on how to rethink what you do in your organization. They can guide you, but you're still going to only get a seat at the table and incremental. You're not going to stand above other organizations unless you do this hard work of really listening for the cues that they couldn't tell you in a survey. For example, Uber, or Kareem, the Uber of the Middle East, found that their ridership was going down. This was when we were all riding more than we are now. But if they had just sent a survey out and said, "Why don't you like us anymore?" or "What's going on?" they would have gotten, these kind of interesting comments. But when they went and watched and looked at their customers, followed their home, not in a creepy way, they learned they were having children. And when you have a child, you need a car seat. And so they did one better than that. They created an app called Kareem Kids, but they also then hired drivers who specifically were happy with kids in the car.
Wow.
So if you only listen to the survey result, you're not going to be inspired to move your business to the next level, to earn a whole growth area that they did. It created a third of their business new because of that. So I think we need to get out of our box of how we listen and use this muscle on an ongoing basis.
Yeah, you mentioned the importance of listening, and one of the things that I think has become so much more expected and desired in today's currency of conversation is vulnerability. So if an organization does establish a goal map, what are your thoughts about making the results of that goal map public to its customer community for feedback and additional input? Today, you see lots of things getting posted that 12 years ago, an organization would never put on the outside.
Yeah, no, we're the openness and the, we call it fearless listening. And just being open to that feedback is really critical. We've been listening to validate how are we doing. We need to listen instead to understand what these lives need. And that is a fundamental organizational switch, leadership switch, that will bring you greater rewards. But yeah, I'm all for, and it's iterative. It's not one and done. It's a muscle. Yeah.
Wow. So speaking of listening, that's a great way to segue to the next topic, which is all about loyalty. So loyalty requires a lot of listening, no doubt. And one of the things that TalkDesk is really passionate about is research, multifaceted, not just surveys, that's for sure. Given what you just said, Jeanne, it's very important. But more than 90% of CX professionals are telling us that their contact center can be a major driver of loyalty. Really, really big one. And then one of the other interesting things we found out, and I don't think this comes as a surprise, but it's nice to put numbers to it, but literally half of consumers are saying they're going to stop working with different brands because of a poor customer experience and they're not listening. So what we did is we collated lots of different data points with our customer insights team's help and asked customers, what are the major drivers that promote loyalty across organizations? And this was really interesting because it was across different geographies and across industries. But these are the 5, and I'd love for your commentary, both of you. So the ability to resolve problems at the first contact, an awareness of an agent going well above what they might need to do just to get it routinely done, the demeanor or the disposition or how that agent makes that customer feel, and then not having to repeat information and continuous, constant threaded communication across channels. So Jeanne and Mike, Does this resonate with your own professional experience?
100%. And typically these come out in surveys, and if you have interviews with customers, the direct feedback that they provide, a lot of the struggles that they undergo are tied to, these are things that if we can avoid them through, what's gifted to us now is, software, which we never had before, we're better equipped than ever to do what needs to be done to avoid all, 5 of these things, or at least build upon that consistency and making sure that agents, if there's any ability for them to better serve customers, that we can obtain that concrete call and information and really work with them to make sure that they're not flying blind, not knowing that they're stumbling and not meeting the customer's needs.
Excellent. Thanks, Mike. I couldn't agree with you more. Jeanne, your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think they're in terms of the categories really important from a human organization standpoint. What people gravitate toward are organizations who display behaviors that are congruent with their own, right? What's on the inside shows up on the outside. We all grow up in a certain way, and we want to go to work and work with companies that treat their employees and their customers as they'd want to be treated, or as good humans. So I think this notion of who you hire and how you hire for the beating heart really addresses number 3. You can't teach someone to be kind every day unless it's in their bones, and we at Lansing, we used to call it, hiring for the light behind the eyes. So I think this notion of how do they show up as people, but also importantly as an organization, do you give them the time to have the conversation? Are you clipping their wings? Do you have that talk time tracking across? Are you giving them tools that force them to toggle between 7 screens so that they're scattered, they're doing the best they can, but they can't be the best human they can be? Right. Ability to solve the problem also fundamentally, and these are some of the things that when we look at this in surveys, we also have to look at the underbelly of it, relies in trust. Are we trusting our front line with the lifetime value of our customers? Are we giving them tools and the ability to make the call by reading the situation? Or do we pen them in as policy cops and make you put the customer on hold to find the answer or get permission? Because when this happens, it erodes for the customer the humanity of the organization. You start thinking about, oh, here we go. And the demoralization of the frontline person who has to only do A, but they can't do B without asking for C, it just changes how you think of that company. So all of these other things kind of tumble out from some of the basics for sure. Yeah.
And I would touch upon one more thing, just while I'm thinking about it, is, we also with being able to tie this all together and not relying only on internal KPIs is of course most important, because you can have, for number 1, you can have a huge number of success with first call resolution. But if you're not tying it together properly, you will have with number 4, the customer calling in over and over again. That rep with their lip, their wings being clipped, which I like the analogy there. They're trying to do their best, but if they're unable to, it appears as a first call resolution, but the customer is still unserved, and then they're going to have to come back and repeat. So you're doing one at the expense of the other. So these 5 items are definitely go hand in hand. So.
Yeah, Mike, you make such a good point, because some of the traditional KPIs have actually gotten in the way of how we do good. I think another thing, Kieran, that's important here is how we coach the front line. We need to coach them for purpose over the score. So much of this has become coaching for getting a better score versus coaching for showing up and taking care of the client or the customer, and you'll earn the score. Don't get, earn. And that means, how are you hiring the coaches, the frontline people? Who are they? What are their skill sets? So much of this fundamentally should have us questioning how we're guiding, developing, and enabling these people to lead and grow.
I think these are so many important salient points. Coaching for purpose instead of a score. Mike, you referenced the integration of these 5 things, and that we could see a masked problem if we're just concentrating on number one, first call resolution. And I love, Jeanne, the point that you made around empowerment and the interplay that has to first call resolution. If you are not policy capping your agents, and your customer experience can be resolved in that first time, in first touch, plus you're giving them the capacity, the generosity of time to do it, makes so much more sense in terms of happier customers. There was another piece of our research that I'll mention here that was really touching on the human element, and that is that the Gen Z consumer is very concerned about a company's diversity. And diversity is near and dear to my heart as well. That was another mile marker in terms of the importance of doing business with how you were raised, Jeanne, a point you made just a minute ago. The other thing is just the empathy and the compassion that's in the environment right now. So a lot of our research was saying that more than 60% of consumers say that they're loyal, more loyal, to an organization that helped out others in the pandemic. Makes total sense because we as a human race are in this together. Well, fascinating. I'll keep us on track. One of the other things that we talked about in the discussion so far is the importance of listening. We also emphasize not letting mechanics get in the way, right? So next, I'd like to pivot to a conversation, share a little bit of our research on this matter. Here at TalkDesk, we asked, what are the types of channels that customers are interacting with today? Obviously, we saw a rise in digital channels at the beginning of the pandemic, but also everything that I see and all the prevailing wisdom in the industry is telling us that digital channels are going to continue to gain ground. Okay, so you can see on the screen in terms of which ones, obviously live chat is very, very popular amongst organizations today, followed by virtual chat. And then as you can see, messaging and social media. And it's really, really fascinating to see video, chat and engagement pop up, just like we're relating to today. So I wanted to share this with you, with our audience. What is your feedback to this data? And do you think that the way customers are behaving is going to continue to evolve digitally or retrench after some new normal is achieved?
Mike, you want to take that first?
Sure. So I anticipate it even going further than that. Customers no longer have the patience or the time to be forgiving when things are not timely or convenient. And I'll use one example that literally just came up last week. I was trying to find out I'm out of contract with a cable company in my area. And I was on my app, trying to do it myself. Was sent to, sorry, we can't help you right now. You have to reach out to an agent. And then I couldn't, when I got back in there, chat with an agent. They kept on sending it into a loop. So when you have when you try to make it too easy and too, full touch without having that ability to, have customers who, either are seeking a human being and, some personalized assistance, the human touch is paramount. You have to make sure that as we go digital, that, the 71% live chat, that, if you rely on a bot and they say human now, that you always give them the ability to interface with your company and not a computer.
So it's a blend.
And when you have an employee, make sure that they're equipped to wow the customer, which is, of course, the most important thing when they interact with us personally.
Yeah, for me, this is about building what I call a respect delivery machine or respect delivery engine. Respect is about making sure that customers feel at the end of whatever they've done that you've respected their time, that you've given the options that are right for them, and that those options are functional all the time. And so sometimes you want chat, sometimes you want live. If one thing is down, now your life is scattered, right? And now you've got to find another way. And so I think these will continue to evolve, but for companies thinking about it, if you think about respect as the outcome of what you're doing, it should guide your understanding that it's not one and done. The other thing that I think is important is that people want self-serve until they don't, to your point, Mike. When you need a human, you need a human. There's been a lot of debate about what's going to happen to call centers in, the world of digitalization and self-serve. Well, I'd say that what we're observing is the importance of a really great person on the other end is more critical than ever. We need to hire people with skill sets and abilities that perhaps are even more profound and developed because we're giving them, they are in many cases, they are the hero, and they are what I call the customer rescue artist. They need to be given all of those things we talked about earlier: trust, the ability of data, options they can choose, not this talk time, beating over their head so that it limits them. And so I think this notion, what we're seeing is when you build a respect delivery engine, it kind of becomes the framework for deciding on how you're going to make these things run.
I love that. That's such a grounding principle. So build a respect delivery engine. So it's not as much about the channels, but it's the way you want your customers to feel respected. So beautiful. Love that. Thank you, Jeanne, and thank you, Mike. And next, I'd like to move on to our next topic. And Mike, I'd love for your perspective on the correlation between how the customer is feeling and experiencing the company and also, the employee or the agent.
Sure. The employee and the customer, they're highly correlated. If you just look up any white paper online, you'll see that they go hand in hand. So the job of any company is to foster that company culture of centered around the employee and the customer. And when employees do well, you want to make sure that we recognize the employees for the positive feedback received from our customers. We make it known throughout the company to everyone, not just the people sitting next to them or within their department. And wherever possible and as much as we can, include those customer testimonials. Hearing it directly from the customer in their own words on how you changed their day and serve them well makes a huge difference to an employee who works hard each and every day to do their job right. And on top of that, another thing that we do here at Fusion and we definitely take pride in is making sure that we reward our employees with an added incentive. So there's an all-star award, and other companies do similar things where we give a gift card of a certain amount of money. And also at the end of the year, they're eligible to join the President's Club, which is typically reserved for sales folks. They have the ability to, or at least a chance, one individual to join that. But we have to remember when we do incentives and we reward employees outside of just verbal recognition or written recognition, that we do not, no matter what we do, tie CX related performance to employee or management pay. It will end up gaming the system, or at the same time, if it's built into their pay structure, it will disincentivize those who still have some improvements to make. So we want to make sure that everyone has an equal hand. It's driven by the customer. Everyone has a chance to be recognized by a customer if you do your job well. So we just want to make sure that they're rewarded and recognized for that. And then with the employee, another thing just to make sure that we foster that customer-centric and employee-empowered culture is never use customer feedback negatively. I would say that you would, if you need to coach someone, just make sure it's phrased and approached to the employee as a learning opportunity. And that they have the ability to actually learn from the good or bad that they're doing, good or bad. And then the last thing is just don't hide customer feedback. Here at Fusion, since I've joined, every single piece of customer feedback is available. We make sure we have those customer testimonials sent out so the frontline employees week over week have a chance to see what customers are saying, and it really makes them realize the fact that they are making a difference. People are seeing it, not only their management teams, their peers, and of course our customers. The last item with making sure that we leverage the correlation between the employee and the customer is to, along with the lines of what Jeanne said, don't rely on surveys so much. We're going to be spearheading this to a further degree in 2022 here at Fusion, is an employee focus group / committee, a cross-functional team of employees and team leads, no management, make sure that they have a seat at the table, that they are able to bring to that committee, which I like calling it because it's something that would be long-term, spearing off initiatives that are employee-led, to remove those obstacles and pain points around tools, resources, processes, and nobody knows better than the employee. So to get them invested in their own betterment, outside of technical skill training and career pathing, their day to day, for them to have the ability to better it. Ultimately, as Jeanne has said, inside out, ultimately it's felt by the customer. We want to keep our employees. A lot of investment already goes into employees who are hired, and we want to make sure we leverage our employee, making sure that we get them engaged if they're not, and if they are, or even if they're not, that we get their feedback so we can better serve them and our customers.
That makes a ton of sense, and it also goes right back to what Jeanne talked about in the beginning of our chat, which is fearless listening. Fearless listening of the employee input, fearless listening of the customer input, making sure that we don't defend or deny, we don't crucify or criticize, but we use that feedback in whatever form, whatever we need to hear in order to get better every day. So there's a lot of resonance between the feedback that Jeanne, you provided, and what Mike just espoused to our audience. So I'm really appreciative of that, Mike. I'm also appreciative of the time that's gone by. So I would love to get some final words of wisdom. And Jeanne, you are a plethora of information and inspiration. Probably one of the things that resonates with me so well is the discussion we've had in the past about I love the honor and the respect of the customer, and also, to Mike's point, the employee, but also, don't force your customer experience personnel to be human duct tape. So there's just dozens of Jeannisms. What would be a few key takeaways that you'd espouse for our audience today?
Well, it's great. I was listening to Mike talk about employee experience. It's so critical. I say this silly thing, what's on the inside shows up on the outside. But the goal map is something that works across the organization, not only as you're building out your customer goals, but use it to then bring your employees in and customer goal by customer goal, ask them what they need to help the customer achieve that goal, what's getting in their way. And because what happens sometimes is that culture is a hovercraft. It kind of feels separate. We need to connect employee culture with the customer goal map, because culture comes when you enable employees to deliver the best thing they can for their customer. And so what we're finding is when we build the goal map, give your employees a seat at the table in drafting them, but then bring your employees in to give that feedback about what's hindering or helping the ability to deliver that goal. Now what we've done is we've glued both pieces together, and they're not separate approaches. So that separateness is what inadvertently kind of gets in our way.
Love that. I love the metaphor of culture as a hovercraft, and when you're everything together and it's synchronized, the employee experience, the customer experience, one goal under one map makes a ton of sense. Sounds so simple too.
Yeah.
And to it. Mike, your words of wisdom, what would you recommend as a best practice?
Always work nonstop to enhance both the employee and the customer experience. Identify those drivers, the goal mapping, with the customer with Jeanne. Make sure that we get that feedback, whether it be through interviews, focus groups, surveys. Multifaceted is always key to get rich feedback. Of course, we all know that on the panel, but for those who are listening, make sure it's diversified, and what you're learning identify at least the top three, just the top three to start with, and they're always going to change, and make sure that you're driving the employee, those drivers that impact our employee first and foremost, and our customers, which is, customer experience. We don't have the word employee in there, but the invisible, party that, player in the entire equation is the employee. So you have to treat them both equally, measure them both regularly, and make sure that we don't disregard one while making efforts towards the other.
That makes so much sense, Mike. I couldn't agree with you more. If I were to offer 2 minutes worth of wisdom, I think what I've learned very acutely throughout my career is the engagement level of those you hire and those you put in front of the customer is paramount. I have seen that who we hire, that light behind the eyes, that expression was used here today, the beating heart. You can teach them an industry and you can teach them all the different protocols in order to support the product and the process of the company, but you can't teach who the human is. And I think there's some things that we've realized in the contact center space over the last 2 years is agents want to be inspired. They want to be motivated. They also want flexibility. There's a lot of work, life, home integration, and a lot of hubbub in the industry about will we all go back to an office or will we stay remote? What we're finding is that, going back to Jeanne's notion of respect, if you create respect amongst the customer choreography, but also do it in honoring and respecting the frontline staff, giving them that flexibility and the fluidity to do a little bit at home, to be a little bit hybrid, but they also crave connection. So in the spirit of what my colleagues here shared today, connecting on a human level, internally and externally, is so important. Respecting the humanness of everybody in the equation is key. Well, I know there's been so much shared. There's been a wealth of information and insights. We also have even more. So all of those who registered for today's webinar will receive 3 different white papers or research reports. The first of which is called The Future of Workforce Engagement in the Contact Center. The second is the complete guide to managing today's hybrid workforce. And then the third is all about the future of customer loyalty. So those are available on the landing page. And I know we have accrued some questions in the Q&A. So I'll go ahead and turn the floor back over to our host, Santi, to moderate our Q&A.
Thank you, Kieran. And yes, we do have one question, and the question is for Mike. Mike, what are your top recommendations for enhancing the employee experience?
It's simple. It's simply put, invest in your employee. Technical skill training, cross-skill training, career pathing. Just make sure that when we're investing in our employees, that they know that we're truly invested in them. We expect a lot of those who work face to face with our customers, but we need to make sure that they know that they're a priority.
Excellent. We do have another question here. What are ways to take feedback and share them to other teams? For example, sizing concerns from customers needing to be shared to merchandising teams.
Oh, Jeanne, that's a great question for you, given your experience in retail.
Well, thanks. I think Mike can jump in here too as well. I'm sure, I think the biggest thing is we need to take the customer off the spreadsheet and the PowerPoint deck and experientially walk people through what's happening. So dump the 40,000 pieces of paper that the customer is receiving on the desk, show them the spaghetti bowl of process steps customers have to take, bring the feedback to life, but also know that you need to be a chameleon. Every team you talk to needs to hear through the ears. They're just hear through the ears of what's in it for me. And so marketing listens differently than service, than sales. Then you can create the connectiveness around it, but make sure that you get their ear when you're explaining and bringing them into the conversation. The biggest thing that you may need to make sure you're doing when you engage people in listening is that they are actively part of the listening, so it feels like it's their idea, that you're not evaluating them or giving them information that makes them feel like they're being judged, because this is more about collaborating, and we're an instrument to help people find their way.
Excellent. And I do have another question. Actually, this one's for Jeanne. The question is, what's the first step in uniting the C-suite for admirable growth, and is it expensive to build a goal map?
Okay, that's a book. I have a book called Chief Customer Officer 2.0, but the biggest thing that a lot of people do is we start with what customers say they're going to do versus what customers actually did. So I call this honoring customers as the asset of your business. You actually need to do the math. How many new customers did we bring in, volume and value, this last month or quarter or year? How many did we lose? Because what we do is we put up the flagpole, the new customers, and we talk about acquisition and pat ourselves on the back. But in order to understand that growth is an outcome of our actions and our behaviors, we also have to do the math and subtract from that the customers we lost, volume and value, and create a net customer asset growth metric that everybody agrees to. There's a lot of work in that. What is new? What is lost? What is lapsed? And how do you make sure it's not by product, but in aggregate, so that the CEO has one version of the truth around growth? Then you can unpack from there what you did or did not do to earn or not earn that growth. You need to create something where people can't cross-tab their way around it, refute the methodology, because you either earned more customers than you did last quarter or month or year, or you didn't. So that's the first step, is to connect it to growth, and then you can walk your way through that. Goal mapping is not expensive. Sometimes you may want a facilitator, but a lot of times, I've written so much about this, you can do it yourself. It just takes a group of people who are really good at facilitating and engaging your leaders before you do it in those Vulcan mind meld exercises, so that they don't come in hearing for how well they're doing, but rather listening from the customer's point of view about how the company is working together.
Excellent. Thank you. I have a question for Kieran. So you mentioned hybrid work settings as a key to engagement. What are the latest predictions for post-pandemic work environments?
Well, like the weather, it's hard to predict, but basically what we see is there is a correlation between the size of the company and their willingness to go hybrid. So once it's presumed we can all go safely back into offices, the bigger, larger organizations, about 70% of them, they're open to a permanent, for whatever that means in today's time, a permanent hybrid approach. And this goes back to the whole notion of respecting the employee and their needs as a holistic human and a person first. But all organizations in the research that we did recently are a bit reluctant to go fully remote once it's safe to return to offices. I don't think I would have said that a year ago, but now, and it really speaks to how fluid all of the pandemic environment and the work setting is. That may change. I do think that there will be some sort of hybrid workforce. It's a permanent part of the contact center industry, but the large organizations are going to lead the way.
Excellent. We have a question here. Apparently somebody was pulled away during this webinar and they wanted to know if this recording would be sent out, and it will. We will have a follow-up email and we will send out a link to the recording. And we will also be following up with the winners, because we do have 2 giveaways that for 2 winners who will be selected randomly. So stay tuned for that. And then the last question is, what's the best way to deal with negative feedback?
I touched upon it earlier, and I'll just start with reiterating what I'd said a little bit and adding to it. Is when you receive negative feedback, it's a stick in the carrot. Do not use it as a stick. Use it as a coaching opportunity slash learning opportunity, knowing that we are all human, mistakes happen. If negative feedback is received and it's something that ties back to an employee, that we make sure that they learn from it. And if it's something that's it's not tied to an employee, maybe it's process or policy driven, then you take action on it. And you collect enough to make sure that you tackle the ones that are impacting our customer base the most with that negative feedback.
Excellent. Thank you, Mike.
I also say that please resist the urge to sanitize it. So
Yes.
keep it in its raw form. Don't freeze it. Don't trim it. Just serve it. So negative feedback is a gift. Feedback is fuel. So don't resist the urge, and don't try to reshape it into something that looks better. Acknowledge it for what it is, which is a gift.
Yeah, and make sure I was clear on what I said earlier, because you brought up a big point there, Kieran, is even if the customer is cursing, make sure that the explicit feedback from the customer is being relayed to an employee, but do not write them up for something that a customer may have been nitpicking about. We do not, I would not write up an employee. I would share the feedback with them and make sure they have it as a learning opportunity.
Excellent.
So don't use write-ups as a stick based on customer feedback.
Excellent. Well, thank you. I want to say thank you to all the panelists. I think this was very engaging. Thank you for those who attended. Great questions. But we have run out of time. I know we could probably talk about this topic for another hour, but this brings our presentation to an end. Thank you, everybody, for joining, and have a great day.
Thank you all.